That's a diesel, all right, but it's not the diesel you think it is. It's not the noisy but trusted 1.3 Fiat diesel that's powered millions of Marutis for over a decade. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the all-new in-house developed 1.5 diesel that makes its debut in this Ciaz. This is a big deal because this reflects Maruti taking control of its diesel destiny. So we're going to find out how good a job they've done. But the first thing I ask myself is, why on God's not-so-green earth would India's leading auto company risk investing in diesel powertrains at a time when the future for them looks bleak? Well, it's because for Suzuki, whose life depends on the Indian market, the risk of not having a small diesel is even bigger. Okay, demand for diesels will fall, but there still will be some demand, and that's what the market leader wants to mop up as much as it possibly can. Now, coming to this new inline 4-cylinder engine, it's basically two Celerio diesels joined together but downscaled to under 1.5 litres for tax reasons. Maruti says this engine is practically all new, with a stiffer engine block, a redesigned combustion chamber, revised valve gear, new intake and exhaust manifolds, and even a dual-mass flywheel. So first reactions of this new 1.5 diesel? Well, it's one of shock. Because quite frankly, after the 2-cylinder Celerio diesel, and this is essentially a 4-cylinder version of the same engine, wasn't expecting much. That engine was noisy, sluggish, had no power. But this one, it's just blown me away on several fronts. For one is the refinement. In fact, it's safe to say that this is possibly amongst the most refined diesels in its class. It is really quiet. You can tell it's a diesel, but when you're cruising, it's really hard to hear the diesel drone. In fact, the road noise, overpowers the engine sound. So how do they make it so refined? Well, apart from using lots of sound deadening material, optimizing the engine mounts and tweaking the intake and exhaust manifolds, Suzuki had two tricks up its sleeve. The first, as mentioned earlier, is the use of a dual mass flywheel, which is a very effective but costly way to dampen engine vibrations. The second secret is a low compression ratio. Now, lowering the compression ratio leads to smoother and progressive combustion, and this in turn leads to better refinement. This engine has been designed to meet BS6 emission standards when BS6 fuel is available and the regulations change. But for now, you can only have it in BS4 spec. On paper, this 1.5 engine produces a modest 95 horsepower and a healthy 225 Newton meters of torque. Now, neither figures are class best. But remember that at 1125 kilos, the Ciaz is the lightest car in its segment, and even a good 25 kilos lighter than the previous multi-jet powered Ciaz. So out on the road, this engine provided enough oomph. In fact, in the dash to 100 kph, it's the fastest accelerating diesel midsizer around. Unbelievable. This engine has a really strong top end. It revs easily past 5,000 RPM when most engines in this class struggle past 4,000. But the strong top end comes at a price, and that is a weak bottom end. And actually, it's largely due to the gearing, which is on the tall side, especially third gear, which is really quite tall. Shorter gearing would have made this car more responsive at lower speeds, and you do have to use the gearbox a fair bit when you're in a hurry. But if you're just ambling along, it has enough torque to pull you through. Not surprisingly, the 1.5 diesel promises best-in-class fuel efficiency and delivers a figure of 26.82 kilometers per litre under standard test conditions. Now, that figure has a lot to do with the tall gearing of the new 6-speed gearbox, which, by the way, makes its debut in the Ciaz 2. The gearbox is slick to use, fairly accurate to slot, and is complemented by a clutch that is light and progressive. Apart from the new engine, there are no changes to the Ciaz, which means you get the same spacious and airy cabin, a decently long equipment list, and a plush ride. The steering has no feel to speak of, especially around the straight ahead position, and reminds you that the Ciaz is not a car for enthusiasts. But then few diesels are. To sum it up, the new engine is remarkably refined, has sufficient punch, and lives up to Maruti's tradition of offering the best-in-class fuel efficiency. With the 1.5 diesel under its hood, the Ciaz feels more polished and takes the fight to the Honda City. It's amazing, isn't it? At a time when most manufacturers are giving up on diesel, especially small capacity diesels, Maruti Suzuki has gone and developed one completely in-house. And for a company that has no real legacy or history of diesels, they've done a pretty remarkable job with this. Now, some would say Maruti has entered the diesel race when the race is all about over. But let's not forget, Maruti is the market leader. And if they think that there is a future for diesel, there probably is.
We haven't really done a comparison in the executive sedan segment for a long while because not a lot has happened over there. But after 7 long years, the Civic has made a comeback and really stirred things up. Now, what we have to ask, are buyers just biting into the initial euphoria, or is it really better than its competition? So, we pit it against our previous winner, the Octavia, and let's find out how that turns out. Look at them, it definitely seems like the Civic has a head start in this comparison with the way it looks. The low-slung roofline that slinks to the back like a coupe really makes it a head-turner. The upswept headlamps, the C-shaped tail lamps, the chrome grille that sits on the center of the tipped forward nose are all accents that draw your attention. 17-inch alloys also give it stature, and overall the Civic sweeps you away with its looks. With the quad headlamps, strong character lines, and an overall clean design, the Skoda does look good. But in this comparison, it just doesn't have the flair of the Civic's design. But let's see if that follows through to the inside. The Civic's dashboard has a lot of contours and layers that split it up. Even the dials are split up into 3 distinct segments with the fuel gauge, the temperature gauge, and of course the speedometer with all the information into the center. So there's a lot going on over here. You do have the touchscreen. It's a little smaller than the Octavia's. Comes with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. But other than that, the seats are comfortable, they hold you in, and overall this feels like a really sporty interior. The seats are low, but there is enough seat height adjust. The point to note, however, is that the Civic has no lumbar support adjustment, whereas the Octavia does. And also only the driver's side has powered seats in the Civic, whereas the Octavia's L&K version that we have has powered seats for both driver and passenger. The Skoda Octavia's interior is less cluttered, it's simpler, it's neater, but I like this because it looks more sophisticated. Materials too feel more premium over here. Even the touchscreen, I really like the way this one is, and it's super responsive to touch too. The digital dials on this L&K version, clean, simple, uncluttered, and easy to the eye. There's also a lot more glass area over here, so it makes it feel more spacious. The infotainment system on the Octavia also offers Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and the USB port is in plain sight on the central console. While in the Civic, it's hidden behind the floating area and a bit hard to find. Also in the Civic, you have to drop into the rear seats as they are low, but in the Octavia, it's much easier to get in. So older people will find the Octavia's rear seat much easier for ingress. On the space and practicality front, the Civic does gain some extra points with a larger and deeper storage in the central console. Also, while all the door pockets in the Civic can store a 1-liter bottle, only the front door pockets on the Octavia can. Now, the Civic does look like it has a lift-back boot like the Octavia, but it's actually a conventional opening. It's quite wide and adequate, but the Octavia's lift-back can swallow a whole lot more. Let's also take a look at how they stack up on the rest of the features. Before we drive off, let's take a look at what powers both these cars. The Civic has a 1.8-litre iVTEC engine with 141 HP and 174 Nm of torque, with a CVT gearbox. The Octavia has a 1.8-litre turbocharged engine with 180 HP and 250 Nm of torque, with a DSG gearbox. Now, the Octavia's engine does have the stronger power figures on paper, and out on the road it definitely feels the more powerful of the two as well. From the word go, there is that shove of torque and it just doesn't let up. I mean, this engine is thoroughly enjoyable to drive, but not only that, it's buttery, creamy, smooth as well. The DSG gearbox also is just levels above the CVT in the Civic. The 7-speed DSG works exceptionally well. In fact, you never really need to use the paddles. It shifts smoothly and efficiently. So whether you're working city traffic or enjoying an empty stretch of road, this engine and gearbox combination is sure to bring a smile to your face. When you look at the acceleration figures, it's also amply clear that the Octavia's performance is leagues ahead. Is less powerful, there's just no two ways about that, but for city conditions it's quite adequate. However, the power delivery is very dull and flat, so to get a move on you really have to wind this engine up, you have to push it a lot harder, and when you do that you realize that this engine that's refined for the most part really begins to sound stretched and strained because of the CVT gearbox. Whilst the CVT may feel strained when you push for more power, it actually feels quite good when you need to drive path throttle in city traffic. However, this engine has a pretty flat mid-range, and when you're between 3000 and 5000 RPM, you will find the need for a downshift. And in this case, it's better not to use the auto mode and just use the paddles. Now, while the performance may not feel quite sporty, the handling of the Civic does. The steering has quite a nice heft to it. In fact, it's very quick off the center, feels quite sharp, and around corners, there's good body control and the car feels stable, it feels planted, it's happy to change directions. The Civic looks and feels low to the ground, but if you're worried about it bottoming out on speed breakers like its predecessor, well, that problem is gone. We went over some pretty big speed breakers, and though you only see me driving, believe me, we did test it with a car full, and the Civic doesn't scrape its belly anymore. The Octavia is also a car that can tackle anything. It tackles corners also in a composed manner. However, in this comparison, the steering just doesn't feel as quick as the Civic and tends to be lighter around center. Still, it has oodles of grip, and even at higher speeds on a highway, it feels sure-footed. So this car feels more solid. There are no squeaks, there are no rattles. Cabin is just so much better insulated, it shuts out the world outside. And this kind of a segment where it's, executive sedan, where you want that luxury, the silence in the cabin is much appreciated. Though we're picking on the finer points, I would say little divides these two as far as the handling goes. Both being cars one would enjoy on a winding section of road or good enough to let you cruise confidently on a highway. However, you do enjoy the Octavia a little more because it has the performance to match the handling. Now, I thought the Civic may have lost a little on performance to be more fuel efficient. So when we did the fuel economy run, it came as a surprise that the Octavia has the better fuel efficiency figures as well. So this is all from behind the wheel. But we must remember that this is the executive sedan segment, and though we always love being behind the wheel, a lot of owners will spend time in the back seat. So let's get right to it. So you sit quite low in the back seat of the Civic. Window line is high, it's a small window area, but it's still a really spacious back seat. It's quite wide. In fact, I think it's wider than the Octavia. There's loads of leg room. You can stretch your legs out, you can get really comfortable. And the seat itself is really soft and well cushioned. It's got a nice recline angle. The ride quality also very flat and composed. So all in all, it's a very comfortable backseat to be in. The Civic's ride is good, but the Octavia is not far behind. In fact, it's quite close. The Octavia's backseat is also amply spacious. There is enough legroom, but the seat is a bit firmer and more upright than in the Civic. However, you do sit higher, so you have better visibility to the outside. Glass area is also larger, so it does feel a little bit more airy in this backseat. Also, the fact that the Octavia has lighter colored interior adds to the spacious feel. Honda Civic is back after 7 years. This new car brings with it its strengths, but let's begin with the integral one, which is the badge on its nose, Honda, which gives you peace of mind and reliability. If that's what you're looking for, then here's what else you need to know about the new Civic. Well, this car definitely looks stylish. It's sporty, it's got this low stance, but don't worry about the word low. It doesn't carry over the problem from before of belling out on speed breakers. In fact, it has enough ground clearance. The other strengths are the fact that it comes packed with features that you expect in this segment. It's spacious, it's comfortable, and it has a good ride and handling combination. What it does carry over from before is the 1.8 naturally aspirated engine, which does have a little bit more power, but doesn't quite match the sportiness of the rest of this car. It's adequate enough for the city, but definitely not exciting. Excitement is where the Skoda Octavia comes in. This engine is buttery smooth, it's strong, and it puts a smile on your face, city or highway. Other than that, it does match up with the Civic in terms of space and comfort. And though it is a little bit more expensive, you do get your money's worth because it feels more premium and more solidly built. But there's a caveat here. For our comparison, we have the top-end LNK variant of the Skoda Octavia. Now, if you're willing to give up a few frills, namely auto parking, sunroof, digital dials and powered passenger seats, then the style variant is actually a bit cheaper. So if price is a consideration, then there's an option there too. Now, after having driven the two back to back, it is the Skoda Octavia I would put my money on. So it's a unique venue for the unveil of Hyundai's new compact SUV, the Venue. This has been done en route Mumbai to Goa aboard a boat. Well, it's finally here in the flesh. We've seen a lot of teasers, but let's take a look around this car. The large cascade grille dominates the front and the split lamps add a style element. Around the side, it does look like a smaller Creta, and you can see design cues from the Creta and Kona all over the Venue. The tail has a beefy chunk of metal, and the tail lamps, when lit, have a unique pattern that make them instantly recognizable. It's an interesting layout here on the inside of the Hyundai Venue. Lots of cuts, curves and contours to this dashboard. It's divided into two clear sections. There's a storage space in the middle. I do like the lip, which means things won't fly out. You do get more storage in the central console over here as well, which serves as the wireless charging pad too. You have your USB connectors, nice big chunky knobs, the infotainment screen over here, which has now the main thing that's been advertised about this SUV, the BlueLink connectivity, but I'll come back to that in a bit. The AC vents, nice clear dials, good visibility all around. So yes, a nice, comfortable interior to be in. In terms of safety equipment, the Hyundai Venue will come standard with dual front airbags, ABS, seatbelt reminders and rear parking sensors. Creature comforts like the sunroof, the climate control system, the 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, and BlueLink are expected on top spec trims. Well, let's talk about BlueLink. The main feature of this car that's been spoken about a lot is connectivity, and it's done via BlueLink. Let me tell you what BlueLink really is. Via an app on your phone, it allows you to access a lot of features in your car, open it up, cool it down. You can also access information about your car. You can geofence it. You can tell where your car is going if a driver's driving it. You can access vehicle diagnostics about your car. So yes, there's a load of features there, but the more interesting one is the concierge service. Now this is done via a SIM. There's a Vodafone SIM that's attached to this car. You get 3 years free subscription when you do buy the car. And this is via the cloud. So say you're new to town, you can actually talk to a concierge, find out information. They can force a map into the information of the car and then direct you where you want to go. So lots of concierge features as well attached to this. Of course, you can share your destination, you have your vehicle diagnostics like I told you, and the settings over here. So yes, it is pretty different, it's new to the segment, and there's lots you can do with this Blue Link service. From all the cues that one received from Hyundai about this being the third space and extension to one's home, it just leads one up to expecting a large rear seat space. Well, it isn't as spacious as I thought it would be in the back seat, but I have to say it's reasonable amount of room. Yesterday we did have two tall people sitting one behind the other and we measured it up, and they can get in. There is space to stretch your legs out. But for three people, it will be a bit tight because it is quite narrow. Also, the central console does come into the rear. However, that does mean that you do have your AC vents here. For the rear, you also have a sunroof that makes it a little bit more airy. I must say there's quite a lot of glass area. So as far as the roominess of the back seat goes, it's quite good. But yes, it's a little short on space. The rear seat may have a little less space than we expected, but that has made room for space elsewhere. Well, I have to say it's a reasonably sized boot. In fact, you can get 2 suitcases in here, or you can get 4 or 5 trolleys standing vertically. It's quite large, this boot, for this size of a car. At the other end under the hood, the Hyundai will come with a 1.2-litre petrol and the 1.4-litre diesel that we've already seen in the i20. But what's interesting is what's under the hood of this car. So this is the new engine that's being introduced with the Hyundai Venue. It's a 1-litre turbocharged engine. It's got 120 HP. It's made it to a 7-speed DCT gearbox. This is going to be something interesting to see. Has a good amount of power and should be fun to drive. We're waiting to test it.
And now it's time for safety tips with Servo Futura G Plus from Indian Oil.